Yeah. Because of course he's not.
Hey guys, Simon here from Top Tennis Training, and in this video I want to break down the differences between the Roger Federer serve and the Pete Sampras serve. Now both players have maybe two of the best serves of all time. Both players have a platform stance, obviously. Sampras starts a little bit higher up with the racket, Federer is more down.
With those two fingers is what you're going to find is that when he enters in through the trophy stance, the weight of the racket automatically pulls down his back. All right, and we know that power comes from extension. The more he can get through here on the court, try removing the bottom two fingers from your grip and just serving with these three fingers. And what you're going to find is the racket is a
EssentialTennis.com, where it's our mission to bring passionate instruction to passionate players.
Rolls straight upwards, vertically, up off the top to the back curtain. So watch me, and you're going to try this without the ball first. You're going to go up and out to your right. So your arm is along the baseline, and your hand, if you were to open your palm, is facing towards the back curtain. Yep. One more of those. And rather, what you're doing is you're going up and then around this way.
Yeah.
Instead, can you stand behind me? You're going like this. Instead, what you should be doing is this. So I'm tracing kind of a rainbow up above myself.
Serve. When you is staying sideways until after.
Roll it. Then I'm going to snap the racket through. So what's going to happen is my racket's going to go from this position up through contact and then all the way down through contact, and it's going to snap past my hand. So I want you to go ahead and try it in a couple of different ways. Number one, I'm letting these muscles stretch nice and loose, and then when I'm releasing the racket and coming down, doing that tomahawk forward into wrist back. It's full extension, my wrist laid back like this. So as my racket drops and I start up, I'm in full extension. We're imagining that we're coming forward towards the serve. And then as I release that serve, my wrist is going to go pretty much neutral or even a little bit flexed. So as we start to take the racket back, wrist is neutral. As we get the racket drops behind our head, we start swinging up into the ball. We have this laid back action. And then as we come through contact, it's kicking forward. So backswing, lag, or let's say the upward swing, and then contact. Looks like this. That's what's happening in the stroke. We add a little speed to that. We can see how we can get a little bit more power. We're adding that to this action too. These are all throwing actions. When you put those together, they get a lot of speed. The final one is going to be pronation and supination. So pronation is when you turn your hand. Imagine you have a doorknob and you're turning it to the left, turning it counterclockwise. And that would be pronation. Supination is turning a doorknob to the right. When I'm starting out, I'm pretty much neutral. I'm not going to get a ton of pronation or supination. As I start down, I'm not going to get a lot of either one. As I start to come forward, I'm letting this racket tip kind of kick out this way, which would be supination, turning a doorknob to the right. So as my arm starts to go up, I'm turning a doorknob to the right. You can imagine the racket coming all the way like this. That's a visual you're having in your head, letting that racket turn out. And then as I come up through contact, I'm pronating all the way around. As I come on through, my elbow is going to finish kind of high and my palm is going to finish almost facing the other direction. So it's going to look something like this. As I come up, not really much, neutral, supination, and then full pronation as I'm coming on through. That's this action. That's this. So I'm pronating, I'm neutral on the way back, I'm supinating as I start to move the racket up here, supinating, and then as I come through contact, I'm whipping that through there. So that actually adds a lot of speed. Each one of these can hit with some speed. This is the radial and ulnar deviation. I can hit that ball onto the ground with some good power. If I'm doing wrist extension and wrist flexion, I can hit that ball with some power. And if I'm doing supination and pronation, I can hit that ball with some power too. So when you put all three of those together, now all of a sudden we're talking about a lot of racket speed, a lot of whip coming through contact. So if you want to practice this, I recommend doing exactly what I did there. Break it down, watch some pro footage, and go through each of those pieces so you can really feel what's happening as you're coming through the tennis stroke. Again, this isn't my normal video where we're going to do a lot of reps. It's a little too complicated. It's more just understanding what's going on. But when we put all that together, we're trying to, the overall goal here is we're trying to get as much loaded up at this point of the stroke and then as much released as we can at this point of the stroke. So you can think of this as a fully loaded racket and then this as a fully released racket as we're coming through.
Okay, let me see if I can't help explain the pronation on the serve, the big mystery of what that word means. And you know, really what pronation is on the serve is really a technique of speeding up the racket right through the ball. And because if you didn't pronate, which means that as you come up and you turn your racket arm right there over to where right now, you know, if you had a wristwatch on the top of your wrist, you could be looking at it. And if you didn't do that, what would happen is the racket would come through so slowly because you'd have to push it through. And so it's like throwing a ball or like hitting a serve where when you allow the wrist right
strings are facing into me, and then I'm gonna aggressively come like that out, very low on the ball, and now you can see that I can really put some nasty spin on the ball. That was crazy. Okay, I gotta I gotta count my blessings there. I almost knocked down a $1,000 camera, but I'm out here doing this for you guys. So that's basically that skipping the rocks. Now I'm gonna hit some more where I'm not really worried if it's going in or out, and I'm gonna hit it over there so that we don't break the camera. That's the first step we're gonna do to start filling the slice in, to start feeling what it feels like to hit that slice. So we'll be back with step 2 on this. Okay guys, so now you know how to skip the rocks as far as, again, we have that right there into our chest. The strings are facing into our chest, elbow here cocked up, and then you're aggressively going with racket head speed. Now you don't care if you're hitting some sloppy, terrible shots, if you're hitting framers, it doesn't matter. This is gonna give you, just make you really feel the cut of the ball, getting the racket head speed, which I think is so important on over again.
Now I have one mindset, brushing that ball from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock.
The Continental I've hit only shoulder, however, I have
still inevitably going to see the pros turning that hand downward.
그래서 볼의 구질은 디스코드에서
racket drop, which is incredibly comparable right here and right there, right? In terms of the drop level and in terms of the proximity to my body, it's pretty much the same. And now as I travel the contact, you will see that on the flat side, okay, right here is the biggest difference, and I'm going to point that out in green. You will see that the racket has traveled a little bit further over to the right side than it does over here, illustrated in yellow, right, where the racket is still pretty much behind my arm. Okay, so you will see that that is the first difference. So how does the racket travel from the racket drop towards contact? You will see that there is more supination going on over here than it is over on this side right here. The racket doesn't quite travel as far out. So when I come out on edge to contact, the ball is pretty much right on top of the racket when I come from the slice perspective, and my racket is coming a little bit further from the right side because I need to pronate to contact more on the flat side over here. So now when I make contact, which again is pretty much off the same spot, so that is an important point right here, illustrated by this line, and I'm not doing it perfectly, but it's quite alright to show you the difference right here. Or the similarity, should I say, is that the contact point is over my hitting arm's shoulder, and that will give me a nice triangle right here, which is always something that we look for. But the contact point is over the same right shoulder. Now what is different is that if you look at the angle of the racket at contact, okay, you will see that on the slice side, illustrated by the red arrow right here, my face is pointing more towards this corner right here on the court, whereas on the green side you will see that my racket face is pretty much pointing more towards that side of the court, or that side of the service box. So when I continue to go, now what happens is you see that the level of my pronation and internal rotation is slightly different. Okay, you see I pronate out, or I internally rotate out a lot more here than I do here. Okay, and that is because my racket face has been placed slightly different at contact. And now the other thing that you will notice is that when I swing past contact on the right side here, I'm swinging a little bit more diagonally into the court, versus on the flat serve, I'm serving a little bit more into the court towards the net strap. Okay, so you can see that, but everything else is pretty much the same. Right here at right before contact, as the edge is still pointing towards the ball, it's very difficult to see this even with a paused frame like this, but it is visible in this sense, right? You can see that the angle is slightly different, how I come to contact, but the naked eye won't pick this up. So as you can see, there are slight differences coming from the racket drop and how far I supinate out to contact. What remains the same is the contact point. What remains the same that is I'm leading with the edge. What also remains the same is that I'm going to pronate and internally rotate. Just the degree of which I do this is slightly different. You can see this right here where the racket face is no longer visible on the flat serve, but it's still visible over here on the slice serve. And then the degree to which I swing inside the
For the serve, I'm using the chopper grip or the continental grip, depending on what you prefer to call it. I'm also spreading my fingers a little bit as well, which allow you to manipulate the racket head a little bit more for more spin and a bit more control. You know.
Between and tip is pointing up and slightly forward, and again the back view. And from here, most of what should happen from here on out, radial deviation, which is again this flexion toward the thumb side. Along with this, the forearm fluid natural racket drop action. Through your racket drop, it starts getting into the critical flexion. Now, if you perform this correctly, it's gonna feel like 2 ulnar deviation. Now, top pros are actually gonna use this unitary rotation of both their shoulder and their forearm in order to drive one edge position. You'll notice that if I don't do anything here, the natural forward momentum, if you look at top servers instead, their wrist is only flexing forward well into their follow-through position. Points. These are, it kind of looks like this. Externally. You see, with the palm down and your arm bent, you're in what's called internal shoulder rotation. And this is followed by a powerful external shoulder rotation that pros execute in. Flip back and snap in, and that's where all the fluid power comes from. Just the stretch shorten cycle happens when you lengthen or you stretch your muscle prior to contracting it. It's kind of like when you stretch back a rubber band and then release it. The stretch creates the powerful snap. And when you're able to get that seam, rotate their hip and torso into the net, this combined with the inertia of your racket is gonna cause the racket to flip down and back behind your body.
Now this force is what allows your arm to subsequently flip back into external rotation. As we talked about, your arm, if you have your racket, you can rotated position all the way until the last few milliseconds before contact. And this up to flip back in. And you'll see that at the start of Federer's acceleration, his arm will start going in front of his body faster than you'll see on Roddick's serve.